TNKR Media. I don't think it's about a chef always being in the kitchen. I think it's about also having a staff that you can respect to reproduce your work properly when you're not there. I think that is actually a sign of a great chef, that his or her restaurant is running on full cylinders when they're not there.
A couple of years leading up to me leaving the restaurant industry, I so badly wanted to be a soccer dad. I so badly wanted to wake up at the same time my kids did. I so badly wanted to go to bed at the same time my kids did. I have very few recollections of putting my children to bed or waking up with them, right? Which like haunts me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Salt Lake Podcast. I'm Lesley Chesterman, and I'm here with my co-host, David McMillan. This week, we have a great guest, Ari Schor, who's one of Montreal's greatest restaurateurs, very successful, a bit of a protege of David McMillan, although David has things to say about that. Ari's restaurant, Beba, has had many accolades on the 100 Best list, and we had a great conversation with him today. Before I get going, I want to remind you that you can check us out on our Instagram page on Salt Lake Podcast. You can contact us for questions and comments at saltlakepodcast@gmail.com. And if you follow us on platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, be sure to give us a fantastic review so that people can follow this podcast and discover this podcast too. In this conversation, we talked to Ari about how he got started, his roots, fascinating, the way he cooks, his style of menu, his years working with David at Joe Beef in Liverpool House. Very happy, and I think David too was happy to talk to Ari before any of the brouhaha of Michelin started. So we kind of got him while he was still innocent. And I think the most touching part of the conversation was how to balance your life and family challenges, especially for chefs. I mean, it could be for anybody, but chefs have a particular challenge, and all three of us had something to say about that. So enjoy.
Well, welcome, everybody. We're off to another episode of the Salt Lake Podcast. We've got a great guest today, my old friend and fantastic top 5 Canadian chef, multiple award recipient.
Top seven.
You were top 4 last year, weren't you?
No. I was 8.
You're top 5 in my book.
We moved up, yeah.
So Ari Schor is here from restaurant Beba. And we're real happy to have you. I want to learn about Ari's childhood. I want to learn about why his parents live in Argentina, how long he lived in Argentina. I want to learn why they left Argentina, why they went to Winnipeg. And then I want to learn, how did you become a cook in Winnipeg? And then we're going to get into all kinds of stuff. I want to talk about with Ari about the work-life balance of, being an excellent dad. If anybody follows Ari on social media, you'll see that it's way more family love or girl dad content. And then sometimes in the evening, you get some boiled meat content and,
That's it.
And some other kind of delicious food content, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And also I wanted to get into a little bit stylistically, Ari is in another dimension. We see often today, especially in the age of Instagram, people copying their lineage, but then also being heavily influenced by the food du jour on Instagram. And it's kind of hard to escape from that world because you're constantly being bombarded about it. So you'll see sometimes in the ether sphere, let's say one top chef in the city is doing razor clams, but of course that means the razor clams are plentiful in the system. But then you'll see all of the other restaurants basically doing the same razor clam recipes as the alpha chef, let's say. And it kind of really creates this weird homogenesis of non-creativity to a point. And how do you stay away from that? How do you say, I'm not going to absorb this, right? I'm not looking at this art. I'm doing my art. I understand this art exists, but this is me. So whatever, I'm ranting. I want to introduce Lesley Chesterman's here, of course. How are you, Lesley?
I'm good. And I was listening to what you're saying, and it made me think that, the Instagram of today is the Charlie Trotter books of the past. Because when I started as a critic, I had all the Charlie Trotter books, and I could actually pinpoint what page a lot of the dishes that I was seeing in restaurants came directly from books. And I think today a lot of dishes and ingredients are coming directly from Instagram. And I don't know if that many chefs are using books anymore. They're using Instagram as their reference.
Correct. And then, there's this point too there, Ari's food's out there. It's different, right? Which is like, to me, shocking because like he worked for me for many, many years and basically did kind of my food, Fred's food with a touch of his food. And I knew though, and I used to like drill him a little bit. I say, when you leave here, huh? You have tricks up your sleeve, huh? And he was like, yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. You're not doing them here. You're like, you're not going to like do a few recipes here. And he's like, well, I'll wait a bit. I was like, you prick, How are you, Ari?
I'm great. Really, really great.
So you're back in your house. I know you renovated your house. You're back home?
We did 5 months of renovations. We're very gracious that my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and then my sister and brother-in-law took us in during that time. And we did a full gut job on 2 floors. My wife did the majority of the design and everything, really, because I'm very good at some things, but like I can't grasp like, oh, this stone would work best in this room with this and whatever. Like I'm not that kind of a person.
Does she also dress you?
No.
Does she buy your clothes for you?
Sometimes. Yeah. I just bought myself a new pair of shoes when I was in Toronto last weekend and she approved. So I think I'm doing better.
So Let me ask you a question. You're born in Argentina, correct?
That's right.
So explain to me, born in Argentina up to leaving Argentina and why Argentina and so on.
So basically, the way my family ended in Argentina, there's like three big groups of the family. One was my grandfather's, my paternal grandfather's family that left from Romania. My maternal grandmother's family left from somewhere around Poland after the First War, and they all settled in Argentina.
So is there a large Jewish, you are Jewish, of course, is there a large Jewish contingent in Argentina after the war?
Exactly, after the First War.
Okay.
And then some came after the Second War, I'm sure, but my family was mostly from the First War. My grandfather, he's like from my mother's side, he was really interesting. So his family, we can trace it back to the Spanish Inquisition, to Italy, after that to Syria and Aleppo, and then from Aleppo to Manchester, England, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Classic, they were part of the what we call the schmata business, the clothing industry. And then in the late 30s, I believe, early 40s, he moved to Argentina because it was a booming economy. It was seen as the next big place. And then he had to go back. He volunteered for the British Army when the Brits entered the Second World War. And then he came back to Argentina.
So explain to me, what is food growing up for a young boy growing up in Argentina of Jewish, background?
The interesting thing is the Jewish part was not as prevalent. To give you like a little bit of a background, you have Buenos Aires, which is the capital of Argentina, which is like this crazy, incredible metropolis. I mean, people have called it the Paris of South America for good reason. There's great food, great wine, everybody smokes, and there's, shit on the sidewalks, amongst many things, but it's beautiful, like amazing meat. But where we grew, like that's where I was born. That's where like my whole family kind of came up. But where we grew up, it's a very small town called Ushuaia. Ushuaia, if you look at a map of Argentina, you look down at Patagonia, there's a little island called Tierra del Fuego. And that's where we grew up. So like imagine like Victoria, BC, but with like 30,000 people living it. I'm talking like the craziest place to grow up. You wake up in the morning, you see the Beagle Channel on one side, you see the Andes on the other side. And we grew up wild, like, and then when it came down, like, we like running around, biking, fishing, doing all these things, but food was always a huge thing for us. It wasn't as much the Jewish food as I was trying to explain, but it was more like what was around there, a lot of Italian influence, a lot of Spanish. And every weekend we'd have the quintessential asado, where, one of the neighbors would light up a big charcoal grill and we would be hanging out around it, barbecuing, eating all these different meats. And, that was part of it. I have many fond memories of that. There's also these things, these cross-country ski lodges, because it was big in that area of Argentina, where throughout the year they would, I don't know if you've ever seen like the Francis Mallman like whole roasted cow thing or whole roasted lamb. You'd go to these like lodges in the off season or during the season, and they would just have a fire pit with like 5, 6 whole lamb just roasting. So you'd get in there and you'd smell that, and it would get your appetite going. But first you have to hit the salad bar, which sounds crazy, right? Salad bar is not a thing anymore. Back then it was huge. You fill up your plate with all these vegetables and things and you start eating. And then they bring you these like little charcoal grills to the table filled with like medium well/well done, pieces of crispy, hot, fatty lamb, So those
That
things,
sounds like
made a lot
delicious.
of, yeah, made a big impression on me for
When
sure.
you say growing up wild, you mean like you had like the idyllic childhood, basically, where it was very safe. You could just take off on your bicycles with your brother and then find a river and explore that river and then explore the forest. And
That's it.
yeah, I
You
had that
do.
too. Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, and so many kids, my kids are not going to get that experience, but we'd like get on our bikes and like we'd find like the skull of a dead animal and we'd like dig it out, like the, or we'd go to like a fish hatchery nearby and just to like sneak into it and just look at the big trout that they were like raising for, eggs, or go on like long bike rides in provincial parks on our own. No cell phones.
What age did you move to Winnipeg and why?
So the economy was really started going down the drain in the early 90s in Argentina. I mean, it had been a tumultuous time ever, to be honest. And my parents did one thing, many things, right? But one of the best things that they could have ever done, that they did for us, was that they made us learn English and Spanish at the same rate.
And your neighbors weren't doing that?
Not everybody, no. So we would like go to school during the day, take English classes at night, like, or in the evenings. And there was a point where my parents were like, okay, there's no future here. There's no future in Argentina for our family. So what do we do? Okay, we start looking around. We're gonna move. We're gonna move where? To an English-speaking country, possibly because it's more prosperous.
How old are you at this
And
age?
I was 13,
Okay.
and they we were like, oh, maybe the States, Australia was in the cards, England, whatever. And then there was a headhunter from the Jewish community in Winnipeg that came down and was just like, hey, do you guys want to come check out Winnipeg? So my parents went. It was February of 2000, or sorry, February of 1997. Bitter, bitter, bitter cold. They loved it. They came back and they said, "Listen, guys, in 4 months we're moving to Winnipeg."
What work was your dad in?
So my dad's an engineer by trade, and my mom was a computer programmer by trade. But she was also teaching.
Oh, nice. So you're no
Yeah,
slouch. You're from an educated family. Wonderful.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're
How was adapting to Winnipeg? And all of a sudden, how was the food and how was like?
it was so, oh my God, what a shell shock. First of all, 13 years old, right? So you're like going through puberty and like you're awkward and you have an accent, even though you've been speaking English this whole time, and like weird, awkward facial hair. Oh, it was a few years of like struggle trying to fit in, You'd hang out only with the other immigrant kids at first, because you were all like a bit displaced and felt weird. Culturally, it was very different, but luckily Winnipeg was, it's a very quiet town. It was back then, and it's changed a little bit since then, but it's still quite quiet and still a really good place to grow up.
I spent all my summers in Winnipeg, and I
Did you?
yeah, because my grandparents were they were farmers in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and my mother grew up in Winnipeg, and they'd farm us out there every summer, and we'd spend a lot of time at Grand Beach and talk about being kids who could just explore and do whatever we wanted in Winnipeg. And I loved Winnipeg. I had some great food. I mean, my family's Ukrainian, so we had a lot of there are tons of Ukrainians in Winnipeg. There's a huge Jewish community. There are a lot of discoveries to be made. When people crap on Winnipeg, I get really upset because some of the nicest people you'll ever meet are in Winnipeg.
Well, same. Also, in my experience in the restaurant business, I don't know. Let's say I met 10 couples from Winnipeg. It's not that many. You don't meet many couples from Winnipeg in the restaurants. But every time I did meet a couple from Winnipeg inside of the restaurants that were kind of wanted to meet or appreciative of the food or wanted a book signed, I was like, why is everyone from Winnipeg so deeply cultured? Right? They're here. They flew to Montreal to go to an art exhibit at the Musée. They're catching a classical recital at Place des Arts. They're going to the Centaur Theater after dinner, and it was like one time funny. The ninth couple that I met from Winnipeg, I was like, I think like Winnipeg seems like the secret bastion of culture that we don't talk about.
I saw the cultural side a little bit because there are a lot of different there are parts of Winnipeg that are very waspy, tuxedo places like that. And then you get to really working class areas. But, I didn't meet a lot of extremely cultured people, but I met a lot of farmers. I met a lot of people who worked for the railroads. I met a lot of people. I met a lot of bakers. I met a lot of Ukrainian ladies who would cook in basements of, Ukrainian Orthodox churches. And there's an amazing thing in Winnipeg that nobody talks about called Folklorama every summer. And did you go to Folklorama, Ari?
My mom was running the Argentine Pavilion. She ran it for many, many years. In fact, she's volunteering this year for it, and she's trying not to run it, but it's like she's so good.
I went to Folklorama when I was 13 years old. And, I'm a lot older now. And in those days, they had all the people. So just for people to know, like David, you should go. But so Folklorama, the city for 2 weeks divides into, so you'll have 1 week of pavilions from all different countries. So Italian, you'll have Ukrainian, you'll have Russian, you'll have the Irish one. I got to say the French Canadian pavilion at Folklorama is the greatest thing I've ever seen for French Canadian. I mean, this was really in the 80s. And so they had music, they had entertainment, they had a cultural pavilion where they had all kinds of art. But the best thing is that all the local people cooking the food. So it was a lot of older ladies from that, country or that background who were doing all the cooking. And the Lithuanian pavilion, my God, I remember the Italian, everything. And the First Nations pavilion, the first time I had bison was there. It's an incredible festival that nobody talks about.
Mm-hmm. Nobody really talks about Winnipeg.
And it's also like you said, it's not like, high-end chefs doing all this stuff or restaurant people, even for the most part. It's like people cooking, like the people from home, cooking their recipes. And it's just so much better. It's so honest and so true to the actual food that,
So let me ask you another question. So, you're a teen in Winnipeg, you're trying to navigate through high school, puberty, like you said, so on, fitting in, all tough things. Where's the spark? What's the job? What's that job? It's always, I worked at, McDonald's, but then I worked here, and then I ended up washing dishes at this restaurant, and I met the chef, and then tell me about that. Where was the first restaurant? Where was the first spark? Where was I think I'd like to do that, maybe, or did it happen differently?
I think as you're asking me this, I'm thinking of three specific moments, like three very clear moments. The first time I was 12 years old, and we had an Italian neighbor, and she gave me a recipe for panettone, and I made it at home. It was like, wow, like a little. That's
the first thing you ever made is panettone?
No, not the first thing I ever made, but it was the first thing that was just like, wow, this took 3 days to make. I was a big nerd growing up, big science geek, and it's just like, okay, here's an experiment for me. I don't remember how good or bad it was. I remember my family freaking out because it had like it was beautiful. You saw these dried fruits and it had like that sugary crust on the top. It was, and that was like the first moment where I was like, is this something that I could do? I remember, talking to somebody about it. I forget who it was at that age. And they were like, well, people are always going to have to eat. So you're always going to have a job. I was just like, okay. And then after that, um, Food Network. Food
Right.
Network was huge, when, I was 15 years old, and like, and that was like, okay, like, we're one of the first generations to be like shown this, you have restaurant quality chefs, you have all these different type of people with shows, you're being bombarded with it, because it's cable TV, so it's available 24/7.
What did you watch? Which ones did you watch?
The original Iron Chef, um,
Oh, the best.
so good. I'm trying to think what else I used to watch. I used to watch Molto Mario when he was cooking, for like three or four people there. That was at the time it was important. I'm trying to think of other shows, but those are like the key ones where I was just like, wow, like this is interesting. This is outside of the norm. So then after that, I was it's summer of 2000, yeah, 25 years ago now. I got my dad was like, "Oh, what are you gonna do this summer?" I was just like, "Oh, I wanted to like, bike around and like go fishing a lot." I used to go fishing all the time, and all this stuff. And he's like, how are you gonna pay for your bait, your tackle, all the stuff that you want to do?" I was just like, "Oh, I guess I can get a job." So not even looking at the classifieds or anything, I started talking to people, and one of my old high school friends, his family owned a catering company. It was like a kosher catering company in Lesley. You'll know about this, the north end of Winnipeg. The north end is where the
Yeah.
majority of the Eastern European Jews settled during the different waves of immigration. So that's where they all were. That was the place. That's where I got my start. And I remember this. I showed up on my first day of work wearing, I don't know, shorts, a t-shirt, and open-toed sandals. And they just looked at me and they're like,
Go
"You
home.
can't do this. You need shoes." I was just like, "Oh, okay." A kid. So
So
that's
what was this
where
restaurant? Well, it was like a kitchen, a
it was.
catering kitchen. What was it?
It used to be a restaurant, but then it became just kind of like a catering kitchen. They would do like um catering for events, like very straightforward, simple stuff, party sandwiches, cookies, soups, salads, things like that. It would be me and two women in their, I think they were, I can't remember, in like their 15.
Was there a rabbi present?
No, no.
Oh,
There
because
were,
I know some people who've done kosher catering in Montreal, and there's a rabbi who comes in.
that's different. So
There's certain
that's
rituals.
when
Oh,
you're doing
okay.
a specific catering. Say if you have to cashier the whole environment or whatever.
Right.
I
Okay.
worked in a kosher kitchen eventually later on at the Fairmont in Winnipeg, and the gentleman had to be present because it's not part of the day-to-day operations. There
Oh,
could be
okay.
cross contamination, whereas this was just like all kosher. And you do some things like sometimes they get a bunch of chickens in that they wanted to sell, but they still come in with like a fair bit of plumage. So you'd be plucking it, you'd be doing these things, running errands, helping deliver things, kind of like washing dishes. I washed a lot of dishes that summer, being kind of like a restaurant hand. And yeah, and after that I was just like, I'm really liking this. That was kind of like the beginning. It felt good to be on your feet all day. It was fun, listening to music, and yeah, it was a really good environment.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Then
it was.
after that, what was the first professional kitchen environment?
The first professional kitchen environment was I'm trying to think. Like I went to cooking school after that at the Red River College. And then you did like your externships. My first externship was really good at a catering company that eventually my brother actually Pablo worked at, called Bergman's on Lombard. And we were just on the sixth floor downtown building. They did events there, and we do offsite caterings all over the place. One day you'd be doing a private dinner for 20 people. The next day you'd be driving outside of the city to a 600-person wedding. It was very dynamic and exciting. And, for a young person with, like a failing attention span, it was really thrilling to be able to do all these different things all the time.
Catering is a good way for people to get into. I mean, I think in the long run, it gets very stressful if you're in charge of that kind of stuff to manage it. But for young people also, did you work from like 6 till 3? You have the better hours. You don't always work at night.
We would have prep days and service days, for example. So there would be like a small team. We'd all be prepping until, say we'd prep like Monday, Tuesday, and the event would be Wednesday. So you do Monday, Tuesday during the day, Wednesday you do the event at night, and then go back and forth. So it was a very, very different, schedule from, especially talking to other people in the industry. Everybody else is like, oh yeah, I went into work at like, 2 and we did X amount of covers, whatever, all this stuff. So this was it was an interesting way to get into it.
So your brother's always been around. So just for the listeners, Pablo Schor, Ari's brother, runs the front of the house at Beba, and
he does the books, and he's very, very, very talented.
Did you work with him in Winnipeg?
I got him his first restaurant job as a dishwasher once. I was working at the now defunct Billabong Bar and Bistro, back when things were like that, in 2005. I was the sous chef there, and then I got my brother his first job washing dishes, and then.
Is he a younger brother?
He's 2 years younger, and then he started going to university, and we always had the dream of opening a restaurant. So he went into, I think he had a double major, small business management and human resource management, at which point he also moved to the front of the house because, he was more interested in that aspect of things, even though he's a fantastic cook still, but, and then, I kind of roped him into it.
So then explain to me how Ari and Pablo Schor end up in Montreal.
2012, I was running out of places to work at in Winnipeg. I was running out of like steam a little bit. I felt like, not just, I don't know if it sounds arrogant, I felt like a bigger fish in a pond that was getting a bit smaller and smaller at times. And I just needed to experience something else that summer.
Well, also to be fair, knowing Winnipeg a little bit, I don't know it recently, but I can understand if you're an ambitious chef. It's like Americans who want to go to New York or LA. I mean, you kind of maybe want to be in a more competitive and inspirational city for food.
Well, you want to learn,
chose pretty
right?
well.
You want to learn from people.
Yeah, no offense to Winnipeg.
No.
It's just,
So you want to learn from people, and you want an outsider perspective. And, the idea was always, at the beginning, the idea was like, okay, we'll go somewhere for a couple of years and then come back, and open something here. That was always the idea. We wanted to make it, to just get a different point of view. And then Pablo and I did this trip through Europe that was like insanely, and like we quit our jobs, took 2 months, did half of Italy, all of Spain, a good chunk of Portugal, and then we came back, and Pablo was like, well, I'm moving to Vancouver. And I was like, okay, I'm moving to Montreal. See you in a few years.
Whoa. So many people from Winnipeg moved to Vancouver.
Yeah.
Language too, for sure.
It's easier, yeah. And then I remember I was on the last legs of my trip, and I emailed, I don't remember if I emailed Dave. I emailed you, and you're like, yeah, come on Tuesday. Fred will meet you.
How did you hear was it Joe Beef at that point?
Okay, so the summer before that, summer of 2011, I had, up until then, and still one of the most memorable, if not one of the best meals I've ever had at Joe Beef. 2011, summertime, it was so much fun. It was like.
When did you open? How many years ahead? David, Joe Beef was open what year?
Oh, I don't know.
I think 2005.
I wish I was better with
it's a blur,
of
right?
Things like
I should know that. I'll look it up in the archives.
But so I remember having that dinner that like, and we got there at 9:30. Actually, I had
9:30.
9:30 p.m. and I walk in the door of Little Beef, the original Joe Beef area, and Dave's standing there by the door. He's like, "Hey, I remember you from Twitter, because we had been messaging or whatever." And yeah, they cooked us this incredibly generous, delicious meal, and I was there till 3.
Do you remember, David? Do you remember that?
Bits and pieces, yes.
Okay.
I have a weird memory for that kind of stuff. And I was there till 3:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And I remember the next day, like walking around the Mile End, drinking coffee, trying to nurse a debilitating hangover that, maybe this is the place. And then the cookbook came out, and then I was just like a huge fan. I was just like, okay, these guys talk the way that I want to work, So a year later, I was staging at Joe Beef. Yeah.
And it wasn't long, actually. I remember it like, how can I say? Some people are forever trainees, and it's for like, and sometimes you graduate a guy to chef de cuisine, not because you want to, because you have to. You can have like 2 or 3 guys quit, and next thing you know, like the appetizer guy is the new chef de cuisine, and that's not great. So, sometimes, in the span of like a year running a restaurant, as you know, Ari, you can have like, 4 months of assassins, and everything's great. And it just takes like to lose 2 guys and you're back to, this restaurant's not that great right now. So, in the span of a year, people think, it's always great. But you, as let's say, as chef owner, you're like, that like we were killer January, February, March. We know that April and May was like shaky grounds. We know that June and July, we got back a couple of guys. They were, killer. It's just like that, right? In 12 months, that like you hope to be good 11 out of the 12. So Ari wasn't one of those hires. I think Ari was just like, you're chef now, we're leaving, It's funny because I remember at that time, basically you took over basically from Emma.
From Omar.
So there was Emma, Omar,
Cardarelli, just give last names.
And then, so let's say Emma, everything's great. Omar, shaky ground, but very good cook. And then, Ari just fell naturally into that position and ran that restaurant. And again, I have to thank you. Like what did I have to tell you? VIP table 10 and introduce you to a bunch of regular Montreal customers is basically all that I had to do. Ari walked into that kitchen like your dream employee or dream, appointment as a chef. And that dream as an owner is when you can hire a guy that's going to run the kitchen the way that as if he owned it himself, right? And bring a culture inside that kitchen as if he owned it himself. He might not do everything, Fred and Dave, but everything was hot. Everything was delicious. I never, people would tell me, it sucks for Ari, even, at the beginning when you're the young chef and, it's always like Fred and I getting accolades for other people's work, but that's just part of the business, I guess.
That's how it is. Yeah.
But, I was always just like, oh God, this is great. I hope he never leaves. And you ended up staying for a while. Quite a while.
Yeah, and just for people to know, Dan, our fabulous producer, just sent me a note saying that Joe Beef, David, was open September 19th, 2005. The fall of 2000. Remember?
No, okay.
Yeah. So you came in quite a bit later, Ari. Yeah. I mean, you came in when they were a kind of semi-well-oiled machine at that point.
Yeah, it was.
I said semi because of what you just said, David.
The book was out. Everybody was, it was.
Was Liverpool open? Was Liverpool House? Were you at Liverpool? Okay. Mm-hmm. You were Joe Beef and Liverpool House?
I started at Joe Beef. I was there for a couple months and then I got moved over to Liverpool House. Yeah.
And it's funny. We knew that Omar was the guy, but there was another guy before him, right? But you can't. It's also really hard to say, you're the sous chef now and he's the chef to the chef. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, you just don't do that. It's kind of code. Mm-hmm. But, you have to sit around till basically the sous chef eats the chef, like the smaller fish eats the bigger fish. And that's that.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, kitchens are competitive environments, and like you can still be a really good person and a nice person and try to climb all the way to the top without sabotaging, without doing all those, garbage things that you hear about in very competitive kitchens.
Thanks, Ari.
Yeah.
That's basically all I ever did when I'd get a job was like to crush the next guy above me
Yeah.
to get his job at any cost. You know?
Yeah, but that's why kitchens are such a great equalizing ground. Is that you're not going in because your dad got you the job, or
that never
really
works.
is the talented people that go. It really is the people who want it and who are talented and hardworking who get to the top. It has nothing to do with much more than that.
It's funny. I'll tell you
really,
a story. When Emma was the chef at Liverpool, of course, Ryan was also, running. Ryan Gray was running the dining room at Liverpool House, and then we hired Lisa McConnell, who was Ryan's girlfriend at the time, to hostess like on Fridays and Saturdays. And the second I hired her, I knew that, like, they thought I didn't know, but I knew through experience that these three will be leaving within 6 months, and that was a fact. And, later on, a couple of years later, a few years later, we hired Pablo at the bar at Liverpool House. And basically on his first shift, I just kind of I squinted my eyes and I go, those two guys are leaving soon. But that's just the nature of the beast, right?
But,
we create couples inside, or we create teams inside of our restaurants. It's beknownst to us. People think it's unbeknownst to us, but we know they're leaving. I always knew Vanya and Marco were going to open something, right? I always knew Ari and Pablo were going to open something. I always knew Ryan and Emma were going to open something, and that goes on, right? There's more stories like that, right?
But I have a question for you, Ari. What was it like in those early days working under Mr. McMillan? Like, be honest. What was it like working with David?
Oh, be nice.
Especially as chef de cuisine, I was fucking scared. Not of them, but of the weight of like feeling like
responsibility.
Yeah, imposter syndrome, all the shit. You're just like, I have to uphold this standard, and it's not like I want, not like everything has to be like this and your chives have to be exactly like that. It's just like everything has to be so good and so delicious and so fun, like the guys want it to be, and enjoyable. And the first 2 years, I remember I was like really, really stressed out all the time. But it was not like somebody barking at me. It was a lot self-imposed. The only thing, like, Dave would always drill into me, and rightfully so. Everything needs to be clean. That was like his number one thing all the time. And I respected that, and Fred was a bit more involved in the food, but Dave was always teaching me how to talk to people, how to be, how to make the transition slowly to front of the house, talking to people, discussing things, and it took a little bit of time.
That's so important too. It's the most important part of the job, right? You can be, once you're an excellent cook, you're an excellent cook. You can't ride a bike better than riding a bike, right? So once you know those 20 pastries, once you know those 20 appetizers, once you know your 20 fish or 20 mains, and you understand cooking and getting food from point A to point B warm, well, the next thing is there's also so many failed troglodytes through the kitchens that would never been able to speak to a supplier, their line mate, or a customer, right? I said the only way that this restaurant gets better is like Fred and Dave aren't here all the time, right? And we can't speak to everyone. And at that time, it was like 3 in the 4th restaurant. There needs to, like, whoever's cooking here or running the pass at this Liverpool House restaurant is Ari, and Ari's got to know that Bobby Sontag is coming, and Bobby's going to want to speak to Ari, and Lenny's coming, and Lenny's going to want to speak to Ari, and this chef from Vancouver's coming, and I'm not there. Fred's not there, and Ari, you're going to have to handle this, and that's all that stuff is quite important to all, to meet people, understand those people, and then go back into the kitchen and maybe produce some off-menu content which I think that we've always done. We never really ran an a la carte restaurant. We always did custom work, right? And Ari still does custom work. Like there's the a la carte menu, there's the specials. But if someone's come to play, we have all these other things too that we're going to play with you as well. So once you get your chef de cuisine comfortable in the dining room, comfortable doing menu modifications, and charging the price that the things cost, and of course keeping everything clean, then you've created a little monster.
Yeah.
And then that little monster is going to leave soon.
Exactly. Well, I mean,
but Ari, do you consider yourself a kind of a protege of David? Like, was he? Should ask these questions when David's not here.
No, I don't. I don't. Like, I'll say this because I know you asked him the question, but I don't want to say that.
But I don't like the word protege. But I think a little bit that as chefs, everybody has somebody who influenced them a lot, and it's not even necessarily that big Michelin-starred chef you worked for. Sometimes there are other people. I was talking to a chef and she was telling me it's not Pierre Hermé that I worked for. It was this local person that I worked for. So, from that side, it sounds from you that you learned a lot from being there.
Absolutely. I have always considered David one of my mentors. It was, no question, somebody that, helped me become who I am today and get to the level where I am today. There was a moment in time, I remember I was talking to one of the servers. It was like maybe 2 years in. It was actually after Lesley, after you came in and reviewed. And then at that point, there were less conversations, and Dave and Fred were around less. And I was just like, they're not talking to me. Like, what's going on? What am I doing wrong? And the server at the time was just like, you're good. You're running the ship now. You're the captain now. You're that person now. And I was just like, okay. And at that point, it was just like, breathe, and then just focus on the food and focus on the people,
I think Marco told me that once. Marco said, like, if you're not, why aren't you talking to me? Blah, blah, blah. I said, dude, if I'm not talking to you, it's because you're doing everything right.
Yeah.
So, like, enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
At least we speak to each other, the better the better I am off, the better you're off.
Yeah.
We're still in the same room together, but like, if we're not communicating, it's because we don't have to.
And then we can talk about other things, other things that matter to us, our personal lives, things, that we need to talk about,
I want to get to that. I want to get to girl dad, but we don't have to get to the semantics of how Beba happened, because I think I was involved in the beginning, like kind of like I found the space. I'd shown you the space because my friend used to own it, right? And
right.
Whatever. But then
it was, I think Pablo found the space, but you made the connection for us,
right? Of course.
And
but wait, back up. I want to know why you decided to make that decision. Like, before you go into the restaurant being open, what was the moment that you said, maybe I've done my best here, maybe it's time to move on my own?
Well, he did a long run. It wasn't a short run, and I would have
no. But I mean, there is that moment that you just say, I think I'd want to strike out on my own.
Yeah, it was a really hard thing to do because we had the opportunity to partner up with the whole group, but I don't know. I was just like, it came to a point where I was just like, I don't, I had that spirit where I was just like, I want this to be me, and it wasn't like an ego thing where it's just like, I need to be the person at the forefront, whatever. It's like, no, this needs to be, a restaurant is very personal. And when you open a restaurant, I think it should be an extension of who you are.
Yeah.
And so
I think we tried to do the deal, but I think at the last minute, the math didn't work really.
When you say the deal, you mean that?
Well, I think we were going to give Ari a little bit of money, and he was going to go run the restaurant. Then we were going to own a percentage. And I think that I think when it came to my partners, my idea of the percentage and the payback rate was different than theirs, and we had a light disagreement. It was just like whatever. And instead of taking shekels from me, they took shekels from somewhere else, and but that made them fully independent, which is right too, right? Which is better in my opinion, right? And it's the right decision at the time for sure. That the only thing that stung about that deal was like I would have loved to like say that I owned it for a year or two, but in retrospect, it was absolutely the right deal for them. right? And then you have nobody to answer from, and you're truly your own boss. The brothers are running their restaurant and don't answer to anybody about anything. So that's impeccable.
And you don't have to make lobster spaghetti anymore.
Oh no!
You
At
can do
that
your
time,
own thing.
we knew that he had all these tricks up his sleeve. That's what I say too. When I come back to saying,
yeah, but you know what? One thing that I really
so original.
One thing that I loved about Liverpool House is, especially in the fall, once summer died down and everything, and I would just turn, from reading the books and all the stuff, I was just turn Liverpool House into like an Eastern European restaurant kind of a thing. We'd start making pierogies.
Secretly.
We started doing all
the pierogies
these
at Liverpool
House. Kielbasa, all the stuff that kind of came from Winnipeg and, came from, and like big platters of smoked fish and all that stuff, so there was definitely, meat at the time on the plate was that, but there's always evolution, I find.
So you were allowed to mix it up a bit. I remember,
Absolutely.
With that famous Anthony Bourdain episode, you were doing Indian food. Like there was Liverpool also at the beginning had kind of a different menu than at Joe Beef. Wasn't it a little bit more Italian? I'm trying to remember. I think it was so Italian far.
At the beginning, just to like piss off my ex-partners at on Saint Laurent Street. Basically, we made it a little bit Italianate. And of course, Emma had, Italian in her. And I think that was even Ryan Gray ultimately was discovering his closeted Italianness. And it ran with those motions. But then, how can I say? When Omar was there, Omar is a really terrific cook, right? Fantastic. Omar's like not a bad cook. He's one of the great cooks. Mm-hmm. And he would do, let's say, the Dave and Fred Liverpool House menu, but then he'd cook Indian for like us or other, and it was just like lights out, right? Like it wasn't like lights out, right? So yeah, I think you were with Omar when they cooked for Bourdain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I remember him coming.
That was a specific dinner for that night. There was some Indian dishes here and there once in a while, but not mostly, like just a little bit. And but we encourage Omar's Pakistani, and not a little bit, a lot. So let Omar do Omar food. So it's just logic that once,
but not a lot of chefs would do that. It's not like at L'Express you could walk in, or so many restaurants. Danielle Boulud wouldn't let somebody walk into Maison Boulud and start putting Indian dishes.
Yeah, but Fred and I are not like. I think Fred and I just basically do what would everyone do? Let's do the opposite.
Oh, we'll do the opposite.
Yeah. That's it.
So it was logical. It's like once Ari figures out Liverpool Fred and Dave menu and nails it, then let's not talk to him anymore and let him do whatever the hell he wants. And we'd see it like years later. I'd go to Liverpool quickly just to see what the specials were and what was, I was like wild. I was just, this is nuts. So I was like, this is nuts. This is crazy. Did you see that thing you made? See this kielbasa? See that? I was always like, You can't
come from Winnipeg and not put kielbasa and pierogies on a menu. You just can't.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
But it's also letting them become the cook that they're supposed to be.
For sure.
Right. And if you don't do that, you're a fucking shit person. Like, just let them cook delicious food. If I'll be the first to say, hey, dude, that's weird. It's not delicious. Me and Ari sent pictures to each other about things that go on, not just in Montreal, but in North America, like, chefs that put plates out and we're like, not delicious. That's like stupid ego.
Absolutely.
I'm touching myself. Nonsense. No, but for real, like, just
but the extension of that
food.
But then ultimately you're going to open your own restaurant, because the extension of that is to open your own restaurant, to choose your own chairs, to have your own wine list. Like it's a natural progression to go from making the dishes you like to saying, I want to take it that step further. So that's what you did.
So tell us about Beba. How many seats? How many bar seats? It's the smallest, best restaurant.
It's the small. Most of my employees live in apartments that are bigger than my restaurant. It's 650 square feet. We have 28 seats inside. So there's 8 at the bar and then the rest of tables. During the summertime, we have a terrace that seats 12 people. So, it's 40 people capacity at most. The kitchen is very small. We kind of do the whole like big prep team, small service team thing. At night, 2 people on the line at most, feeding up to 80 people. And yeah, me working the pass, getting in there, sometimes not even being there. Well, if I get into the kitchen, there's 3 of us on the line. It's impossible. But I mean, we kind of just
talk to me about year one. Like let's say opening menu, year one. You listening to the customers, and what did that evolve to? Like, how far off were you from writing, let's say, the original Beba menu, then to what it's evolved to today?
Oh my gosh. Well, you know what? There's still stuff on that opening menu that we have on today. But over time, I think more than the custom, there's some weird things, like at first people are like, oh, you're from Argentina. Okay, I should have a steak here. Why don't you have a steak on the menu? So we put a steak on the menu, nobody would buy it, you know? But then we put beef cheeks on the menu, and then like I can't get enough. You know what I mean? That's one of the evolutions, like you think you know what people want, and then like you always say, the customer tells you what kind of restaurant you're going to become. Um, One thing that really changed our restaurant big time was COVID, the pandemic, and all that stuff. We were open for 8 months, doing food that I was happy with, for the most part, and starting to evolve, starting to get into the whole boiled meats thing and all that, really old school stuff. And then we had to shut down. And then nobody had a job. And then we figured out this takeout business where we would make our empanadas, which really saved us, But during that time, rolling, 120, 140 dozen empanadas by hand, staring at myself from the bar, across the bar into a mirror and being like, okay, like this is for now, but what's next? We started really trying to define what we were, started playing around, started bringing in, different things, and that's, to touch on, that is like started looking at what everybody was doing on Instagram and going the opposite way, just like Dave and Fred would look at what everybody else is doing and then just
not do
go the
that.
other way. Yeah. You don't have to do that.
So
you don't have to do it because everybody's doing it.
I want to touch on
That's risky, though.
Yeah, it's risky for sure.
Opening a restaurant is risky.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me about the epiphany moment of boiled meats, but then also as you're talking about that, see if you can kind of merge it into, this is like a subject that we've spoken about personally, and I speak about personally as well with, our friend Julian and other people. There's this ferocious, almost separatist food movement sometimes about local or die. Everything's got to be from Quebec, like, which is kind of weird because I say, like, the fish is actually the fish is more local from Boston or Portland, Maine, to Montreal than it is from Gaspé. Like, the fish market in New York City is actually closer to Montreal than fish from Gaspé, right? Mm-hmm. So when I look at locality, I basically go like, draw a circle around Montreal, that you can drive at in 5 hours, and that's good enough, right?
I think the boiled meats thing, how did it start? I think it was like a lot of home cooking, and you start thinking about it. And like Dixon, who was my chef de cuisine at the time, or my sous chef at the time, eventually became my chef de cuisine. Now he's in Toronto. We always liked eating, like, it's gonna sound so weird, but you have like these
out of the stock pot.
Yeah, the wings out of the stock pot.
Same.
Like
so
outside,
good,
like super,
so
like the tacky skin, gelatinous, and it's so comforting when you're like, cooking and not taking care of yourself and working long hours. And it's just like, but then you're like, okay, well, where does this come from? And that's when you start not going to Instagram, not going to a website. You start looking at the books that you have at home, and you're just like, or if you're going on a website, you're going back in time. You start researching, and that's it. It's like historically, food wasn't all about the Maillard reaction and everything roasted and the perfect sear and caramelization. It was like, I have to cook this chicken in a pot because it's the best way that I can feed my family. And that's where I came from. And we started off, making like things like we'd make cotechino, but we'd make it with guinea fowl instead of with pork. So we would grind up the guinea fowl skin and fat, which is very plentiful. It's a beautiful bird, and rolling it up and stuffing it with all the or seasoning it with all the Christmas spices and poaching it. And then it just kind of became a thing. And boiled meats it sounds reductive, in a way. It's kind of like, oh, we're just boiling meat, but there's a purpose to everything.
It's actually way more complicated. Like, it's a lot easier to take a guinea hen breast out of the fridge and throw it in the pan, slice it, put a nice jus on it with some cool vegetables. When you're actually, doing a multi-meat boiled Beba style Ari dinner, there's pre-salting, there's blanching, there's mise en place and separation of meats, there's meats plus sausage
being built over 4 or 5 days. Sometimes we'll make a bonito misto. It's like 4 or 5 days of, okay, this day we cook this cut because we only have room to cook this cut in this broth today. Okay, cool it down. Okay, what's next? And like you're building flavor in a completely different way. And that to me is more satisfying than, doing like what's it called? Like, and you're like you said, roasting a piece of guinea fowl and being like, okay, what do I want on this plate? I want like something creamy, something crispy, something pickled, something like this, where you just go like grocery shop, through like your line cook's mise en place for ingredients. Whereas this, I'm like, okay, this dish has a story. This dish comes from somewhere. And it's so much easier to stand out when you can sell your food like that, when you can explain it to people from a term historically.
When does Japanese fish market come into play?
COVID. Around that time, our friend Julian was like, hey, you should, you like sardines? Yeah, check out these sardines. Or check out this firefly squid and check out all these things. And then,
guys, can you just say who your friend Julian is for people listening? So when you say Julian, both of you, can you divulge?
Julian Doan is like he's an anesthesiologist who's a longtime customer of our restaurants, and like he's eaten Joby food for many years. Highly intelligent person, and really searches things and beats them down to their pure essence. Like, it's almost annoying. And so he's been a longtime friend and admirer of Ari's cooking. And he owns today Sushi Nishinkaze. Just, I think, Montreal's, probably only true Idomai 8-seat dining experience up on Saint Laurent Street. And he's just a particular person who has a lot of information. He tackles things, I believe, the same way he would in his medical education, right? When just knowing that there's white asparagus at the market is not enough for Julian. We have to get to the bottom of this. We need to know all of the genuses of white asparagus, which are con, which are the truly best, not the what, and it's not even like he won't take Danielle Boulud's word for it. Like, forget it. Like he'll
do his own research.
Yeah, he has to come to it, and then he'll figure it out that this is the asparagus.
So Ari, he's your fish consultant, or
he's a very good friend who has helped steer us towards even higher levels of quality all over. And I mean, like the Japanese fish was really eye-opening. We've had we're not at the same level as him. He personally imports all the fish that he serves at the restaurant, which like nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. No matter what people tell you, nobody's doing that. We have a supplier, we have brokers that we deal with, but he's doing it himself. But what we found is like, for certain applications, like serving fish raw, you can't compare. You can't compare the quality. I've received cod from Canada that came in rigor mortis, but the inside wasn't properly cleaned. So like, like the quality is, like you're just like, I can't serve this. But then you get like your fish from Japan, and even if it's not like at the same level as what Nishinakaze would use, but still, it comes in neatly arranged and perfectly packed, and the guts are in really good shape. The gills look beautiful, and it's in better shape than any fish that you would probably get from the East Coast here, unless you caught it yourself.
So there's no point about talking about local if the quality isn't there.
Correct. There's a handling
That's
issue
it.
in North American fish, sadly. Like there's great mackerel being fished, but they're being shoveled into bins, thrown into the back of trucks, thrown into the back of a cooler, thrown again into a truck, driven to Montreal, thrown off the edge of a truck, thrown into another walk-in, and there's 4 more boxes that are put on top of that box. So,
right, so there's no respect for the product the way the Japanese
they hold each fish and wrap them individually and place them in a box. Sometimes there's ice, then sawdust. Like it's just a different thing completely.
So that mackerel that you speak of, Dave, it costs what, like $5-6 a pound? The mackerel that I buy from Japan is like $32 a pound. You know what I mean? So yeah, you're paying for the flight. There's no question about it to a degree, but like
that's a business class flight.
Yeah, you can't compare, you know.
But he's right, because I'd be like, sardine is sardine, and the good sardines are fine. But then you have sardine and then you're like, okay, yeah, like the best sardine in Montreal, sadly, or flown in from Portugal or wherever, these are better. It's just. It's just
but this is what Costas Spiliadis at Milos was saying for years. People would say, oh, your fish is so expensive, you got it brought in from Greece. And, so this is not new. If you're looking for ingredients, you got to pay for
it. If you're ingredient driven, that is, sadly, there's a lot of not that. There's a lot of people that whatever's available, there's some people that are fine with cooking what I call number 2 product. It is what it is.
But the customer has to be ready to fork up for that price, so it's one thing to find the most beautiful things in the world. And the other thing is you have to have a customer base in our city. And a lot of people say there isn't in Montreal. But it sounds to me, Ari, but you guys, it sounds to me like there are enough people who are willing to spend.
Oh, for sure. You're not going to go bankrupt doing it.
Well, yes, but also you have to offer value. You have to offer an experience that is unique, that is true to form, true to who you are as an owner, and it has to be of good value to the guest. I think that's imperative. Whether the guest is paying $400 a head or $100 a head, I want you to leave the restaurant being like, maybe, being like, I that was unique, that was delicious. I want you. If you leave a restaurant thinking, oh my God, I spent so much money,
there's a problem, right?
Maybe
no, you just have to say, I love this place. It was cheap for what it was.
That's it. I don't think restaurants should be cheap. I think restaurants of quality that demand a lot of work should be more expensive. But I think it's a fine line between finding profit versus value. Very, very tricky.
Ari, we kind of been a little bit dancing around, but could you describe your cuisine? Like, there are influences. So you're talking about Argentinian influences. You're talking about Joe beef influences. You're talking about Jewish food, Winnipeg. So how would you describe, if you were writing up a paragraph about your restaurant, how would you describe your cuisine?
It's so hard. And I'm not saying that from like an ego point. It's just like, it's hard for me. I always tell people it's a very personal restaurant, that it's being influenced by it's not about me, but it's more like about what's happened to me in a way. Like it's about life experiences. So at first we were just like, we're from Argentina, but the food's a little bit Spanish and a little bit Italian, and that still holds true to form. But then there's the Joe beef influence. There's definitely French sauces. We make veal stock still in our kitchen. We make chicken stock.
I'm so happy to hear you make your stock. There's so many people saying I don't make stock anymore. I'm like, oh.
Well, you know what? It's part. It's like
part of the process.
It's part of who I am. It's part of. I used to make veal stock twice a week for each time for 2 days in the corner of the meat section at Liverpool House. So that's who I am. You learn all these things, and then when you're any other sort of tradesman, an electrician, a plumber, whatever, you start off as an electrician, you work on smaller circuits, and then you get to bigger circuits and bigger things. And then eventually you have all this accrued knowledge. And it's like almost like a disservice to yourself to not utilize it, you know? So I think
I feel when a chef like you, Ari, starts speaking his own language and starts to like be confident in the singular food that they're making, and I couldn't even name you. You don't have an offshoot yet, and I couldn't name another restaurant that cooks even close to the food that like you're cooking, right? Um, I think that's when we're witnessing greatness, and really, I think you're just a phenomenal cook, and it's always a pleasure to look at the food that you're cooking. It's
that's
spectacular,
really
and
sweet.
you should. No, I'm not being sweet. I'm
Being
just saying
honest.
it's important to point out when like there's 30 painters, and there's like this is the painter. This guy figured something out that the other painters, while the other painters are kind of getting inspired from each other, there's this one new painter who's like basically discovered a different brushstroke or is moving forward in a different way. Like watching over the last few years has just been like
But do you feel that way, Ari? I mean, the thing is when chefs, I mean, having seen a lot of chefs who've gained a lot of success, like for you, is it just head down and keep working, or have you taken the time to appreciate the success that you've had?
Um, it's hard to like sit down and enjoy, you know. It's hard to sit still. Um, I always feel like I have to compete with myself, in a way. Not necessarily the healthiest thing. That's why we have things like, therapy and whatnot, you know. But what I started doing actually was it was Ryan Bartlow, chef owner of Ernesto's in New York City. Uh,
another singular
one of
voice,
one of the great cooks,
genius.
great cooks.
Yeah, one of the great cooks of
Oh
North
my
America.
God. Not only, but the craziest thing, and this is like a year and a half ago, I'd eaten at my restaurant a couple of times. And, we were doing an event there. So the first day we came in, we went out for dinner together. The second day we prepped. We were prepping all day. And then he's like, okay, let's sit down for dinner. I was like, great. Okay. We're going to sit down in his restaurant and he's going to cook for us. He sat down with us. Ate his own food because he enjoys it, and like you don't see that many chefs doing that. How many chefs eat their own food? How many like if I had the opportunity tomorrow, I would sit down at my bar and eat the tribes dish that's on the menu right now because I love it. So are you cooking the food that you love to cook? Is that what's inspiring you? A love for food, a love for cooking? That was a pivotal moment. And I was just like, wow, this guy is really enjoying it. Maybe I should be enjoying that too. Maybe I should come in for dinner with my girls when my wife is out of town.
Right. I would often write that in restaurant reviews. I always, the comment of, I wonder if the chef ever sat down and ate this dish because it just doesn't make sense or it's not very delicious. And that would happen more often than you think. That I think that it becomes something that you don't love. It just becomes about assembly and trying to hit all these notes. Like you said before, there has to be something crisp. There has to be something this. And at the end, you end up with food with no soul, And even if I go back to all those chefs who are copying from the Charlie Trotter book, that if you're copying directly from a book, you're trying to, that's kind of a very immature way of cooking. Although some people cook that way all the time, but it really has to be something that exactly what you said, that you love to eat.
Otherwise, you should be working for somebody else. There's somebody out there who cooks food that you want to eat, and maybe go work there instead of doing your own thing.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
That's a good segue to talk about being a super dad. I know that, and we speak about this because we send each other messages sometimes. We send each other messages on Friday night. Like I've cooked a beautiful meal at the farm, and Ari's, dude, it's Friday night. It's 6 p.m. And I open my phone and I get a little message and it's Ari there, and Ari's also at home cooking for his girls, and he's got his two beautiful bright-eyed girls there and his beautiful wife.
How old are your kids, Ari?
So, our oldest is 5.5 and our youngest is 3.5.
Oh boy, that's the hard years to get them to eat sometimes.
Crazy.
But they're so loving at that age too, though.
They're incredible.
Just love everything daddy makes.
They're critical. I always joke around that in the mornings I'm like a short order cook. Like yesterday, especially, I had three different orders, because my wife likes her eggs done a certain way, but my kid doesn't want eggs. He wants this, and then the other one wants that. But I love it. Honestly, it's just like, oh yeah, that's all you got? Okay, let's go, and then we start cooking. It's really, 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 really difficult to find a balance between being a good chef, a good owner, a good boss, a good husband, and a good dad in the restaurant industry, because most people think that they have to be there at night during service. I'm not there every night, you know. I don't have to because I'm there every day. I'm tasting everything that we make. I'm behind a lot of the decisions. I'm not one of those chefs that's like in and out, whatever. Like I'll get in there and like this week we one of our night cooks is switching over to prep, and guess what? 3 days out of the week when we're working together, we're gonna be like working on things together. I'm gonna be tasting everything, making sure that everything's at a level, and that allows me to drop off my kids in the morning, pick them up from school, have sing-alongs in the car, bring them home, have dinner with them, put them to bed. And guess what? A lot of nights, what I really like to do is I put them to bed, and then, you know, I go, okay, I'm going back to the restaurant. And I go back to the restaurant for 8:30. And then I get that side of things too, because I miss cooking all the time a lot. I'm not going to say I don't. I really do. I love cooking. I love cooking for people. I love seeing people's reactions to something that I'm very proud of. So finding the balance, between that, doing everything so that your wife doesn't always feel like she's the the one taking the lead in everything, which is really hard. Um, there's so much, what's the term that I'm looking for here? There's like this like invisible load that usually the woman has in a marriage like this, in a relationship like this with kids, and like I'm just trying to make sure that it's not everything that she has to do. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes like we will get into arguments over it, and she's often, if not almost always, right about it, because it's.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. Having my ex is a chef, and I don't think he ever came to many school performances or to any doctor's appointments. And on the other hand, you respect the work, and you know how much work it is in the kitchen, so it's hard to complain about them not being there. And then on their day off, a lot of these chefs are really tired, and they just want to chill, or they want to just do something. And it really is, we don't talk enough about, but, even for women chefs with the men or men chefs with the women, it's a really challenging relationship that, in my case, it didn't end very well, but I still to this day respect the work. I really understand how much work you have to be in that kitchen. I actually just wrote an essay on my Substack also about a critic who criticized a chef for not being in his kitchen when she went to review. And I'm against that, because there are a lot of times over the years that I reviewed restaurants and the chef wasn't there. The first time Tokay got 4 stars, Normand was in New York. And I don't think it's about a chef always being in the kitchen. I think it's about also having a staff that you can respect to reproduce your work properly when you're not there. I think that is actually a sign of a great chef, that his or her restaurant is running on full cylinders when they're not there. And if any chef is listening to this, watch a documentary called Chef George or King George. It's the story of Georges Perrier, who is the chef at Le Bec Fait in Philadelphia. And if anybody wants their career to end that way, you don't. Because if it's somebody who just becomes a control freak in your restaurant, who is looking over everybody's shoulder all the time, it's horrific. It's sad. So I think you're doing the right thing, Ari, because it's the key to survival for chefs today.
It is. I had so many issues, with my first daughter, Dylan. Not any issues with her or anything. She's a fantastic woman. She's, 22 years old now, and basically helps me out with like a bunch of stuff. She's kind of like my de facto assistant. But man, was I not there? Like I missed it all with her, and I think when she turned 18, there's a couple of conversations where, that kind of stuff came out. And, I was seeing it happen a little bit with my other children. And, there's many reasons that led me to, sell and press auto destruct on my career, in the restaurant business. But, one of the major ones, like I used to laugh at soccer dads when I was a young chef, year 2 into Joe Beef. But now, like, a couple of years leading up to me leaving the restaurant industry, I so badly wanted to be a soccer dad. I so badly wanted to wake up at the same time my kids did. I so badly wanted to go to bed at the same time my kids did. I have very few recollections of putting my children to bed or waking up with them, right? Which like haunts me. It haunts me, And then when I had the opportunity to get out of the restaurant business, like the first thing that I did was readapt my sleep schedule to be like basically up before them and super annoying. And I wanted to be the short order cook. You can have your eggs whatever way that you guys want. And I'm going to make these lunches for you that I always dreamed of making. And, being the dad that I kind of wasn't, it was just devastating for me. It haunted me. Right. And then a new baby comes along and it's, you want to do this, you want to go biking, you want to do Lego, it's all good, right?
We'll get to that stage. I'll get to that stage.
You're like, Dad, leave me
Right,
alone.
but it's fine until they say that.
Could we play Lego together? No,
I'm not going to get back those years I'm missing with Dylan.
Yeah. And also, actually, one thing, to be fair to my ex, his father was a chef too. And it was the exact same relationship of, not even seeing your parents ever. Because in France, they work like dogs. So it's I think that's one thing that's good to break it before it goes on for too many generations. So if that's the way you were brought up, that's the way you'll do it. And I do think there was huge expectations for just the woman to do everything over the years. But, speaking for all the women out there, after a while, you feel very lonely and alone in a relationship with a chef because they're not there. And then when you see them, they're exhausted and they're having a hard time at work. It really is a big challenge.
The thing is, though, this weird thing enough, you all, as a chef who's not being like with your family, you also feel incredibly lonely.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
It sucks to come home and to go to bed and have to be quiet because you don't want to wake up your wife and your children because they live normal lives and they want to wake up. And the other thing that sucks is it sucks waking up and your kids have gone and your wife is gone. It sucks. You're so lonely.
I never thought it could go both ways. Because
you'll do a 5-day cycle like that of going to bed after your kids, like not seeing your kids go to bed and not seeing them wake up. And you wake up alone, you go to bed alone, and you go to work, you work with those same people doing the exact same thing. And it plays on you. It plays on you.
Yeah. You're spending more time in your restaurant than you are at home.
Yeah, it's like,
you're spending more time with your employees than you are with your family.
By far, by far.
And then next thing you know, your kids are 7 years old. They learn to read without you. They're doing all these things and you don't become important to them. That's another thing too. So what you're doing, Ari, is smart for your future relationships too.
It's something to deal with. It's true. I know it may be hard, Ari, but I think you've been all about work-life balance for a while now. And again, I commend you and I admire you for it. It's beautiful.
But I see a lot of chefs now who are like you and David, now you today, because, I do know older chefs, people like Jean-Paul Grapp, David, both of our teachers who, said, my biggest regret in life is I don't know my kids. I never saw my kids. But I see a lot of guys your age who are now really changing all of that. So I hope any chefs listening to this are thinking about that, and they probably are, and it's good to talk about it so they can relate as well.
I think restaurant ownership at first was crazy daunting and being like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I remember days where like when our Isabel, our first daughter, was born, and my wife Ash would drop me off at work at noon and then pick me up afterwards with the baby in the car and all this stuff. And it just felt like, but like once you own the place and once you're running it, you have to run it. You can't let it run you. And then you have to make those decisions for the better of you, for the better of your team. 2 years ago, we switched everybody in the kitchen to a 40-hour work week. That's 4 days a week, 10-hour days. And everybody now, as of this past year, has one prep shift and 3 service shifts, except for, myself and our head day prep person. And I remember when we first put in that 4-day work week thing, like Dixon, who's my chef de cuisine at the time, he's just like jokingly, or maybe not so much, he was just like, you're, like in the Shawshank Redemption, where when they leave jail and they don't know what to do with their time. And I was just like, holy fuck, did I create a jail for you? He's like, no, that's not what it is. It's just like you've never seen this before, so it's just like now you have 3 days off. Now you can,
I know they don't know what to do.
Know what to do. You look at a place, was it Chepanese in the 70s and 80s? You weren't expected to work full time there. You were expected to work part time and have other interests. And they thought that, Alice Waters being a Montessori teacher turned restaurateur, that helped the restaurant. And it's been open for how many years now?
Forever. Yeah.
Over 50 years, for sure. You know what I mean? So maybe that's one of the keys to longevity, empowering people and creating that balance for them. I don't know. I hope so.
But there are 2 messages there. There's this message to chef that we're giving, life balance, work-life balance is important. Then there's the other message that chefs are getting is, if you really want to make it to the top, you've got to give it your all and be there all the time. And it's a cutthroat business, etc. And I got to say, even now with Michelin coming in, let's say somebody says, I want 2 Michelin stars, right? Let's say that, sure, a lot of people are going to get 1. Mm-hmm. So let's say that one chef says, I'll die if I don't get 2. Okay. Look at the way the French chefs live their lives, that it was all or nothing. So if somebody decides that they really, maybe they shouldn't have a family. I mean, maybe they should just be alone. And that's great too. I mean, if somebody really wants to go all the way and focus and live that kind of obsessive life, that can be commendable too. If it's almost like being a priest at that point, that you just really want to dedicate your life to your cooking. You see that.
I get that. And it's fine for those people. Yeah. Listen, if that's your dream, yeah. I wish it for you.
Yeah, we've seen them. We've seen them.
My dream was to be a girl dad and a boy dad, and grow things, and Ari's dream is a bit of both, I guess.
Years ago I interviewed Morimoto, the great Iron chef, and he said the most interesting thing about ambition. He said, "Don't aim for the top." He said, "Aim for the middle and work your way up." And I thought that was very interesting, was that some people aim too high and they burn out really quickly. But I just, what he said really makes sense. The more you think about it, the more it makes sense.
Well, I think it's like you need to be aware of your skill set, your areas where you're really good at, the things that you're really good at, and like work on them, and grow like that, rather than try to be something that you're not, someone that you're not. Reach too far, and like you said, then you burn out, then you're not being true to yourself.
Yeah. And how do you face, like, how I brought up the M word, what are your thoughts on the Michelin Guide? And by the time this comes out, we'll know the results, but it's good to know before. Like,
yeah,
what do you think of this? Is it something that you look forward to, or you dread?
Neither. I don't dread it, and I'm not like chomping at the bit to see what they have to say about restaurants. And it's not because it doesn't matter, because it does matter. All these lists, like it or not, they matter, like they get people in seats. They do.
For sure.
So for the chefs that are out there being like, oh, I don't care about, like this, just
critics, they'd say that, oh, I don't care. You come to my restaurant, I really don't care. I'm like, well, then you're dumb. You should care if a critic's coming into your restaurant, just because it's going to make a difference, maybe,
It would be great not to have to deal with it, to be honest. It would be awesome if we could just like run restaurants and not deal with the pageantry of being rated. That would be so wonderful to not be rated.
But then again, a lot of people like it. I remember Nicolas Jongleur saying after 3 weeks of him opening Café Jongleur, he says, "Time for the critics to come in. I'm ready to be reviewed." And he was chomping at the bit.
But he was born into it.
Yes.
He was a psychopath.
He loved being reviewed. He loved, until he didn't get a good review, which was rare, but it happened. And then you don't like it so much,
Yeah. I think what I would really like is for the people that have opened restaurants that are really aiming for that 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, whatever it may be that they're aiming for. I really hope they get it because, again, it's true to form, it's true to who they are. They've trained at X and Y places. They've dedicated their lives to getting to that level, you know, that, Michelin holds commendable for X and Y stars, whatever it may be. But I personally, as an owner, I'm not willing to change the way that I do things for anybody else's approval but my own, my business partner, my best regulars, and my family.
You're not going to adapt the way you cook for a guide or a critic or a Michelin or anything. Yeah.
No, you know what? If they think it's good enough for anything, a mention, whatever it may be, like, thank you. I'll take it. Anything, I'll take it. But I remember when they first announced it, I messaged Dave, actually. He was the first person that I mentioned that I messaged when this came out. It's like, so what do you think about this? I was like, what do you think is necessary? And Dave gave me a breakdown of what he found, what he thought, with his many years of experience would be necessary to garner a Michelin star. And I'm just like,
no,
I'm not doing that.
Look, we already have the high-end products. We sell like a kilo of caviar a week. We sell so much beautiful imported fish. We sell foie gras from a great producer here. We have all the luxury things that, Michelin may want, but we're doing it our way. And I'll be stubborn till the day everything ends, that's fine.
It worries me because if we can make a comparison, is you talk to a lot of winemakers who say they adapted the way they made wine for Parker. Okay. So here in Montreal, we have a really nice, great restaurant scene. And I'm always afraid when an outside source comes in, like that suddenly things could change. I mean, it won't be as radical as people, suddenly changing their wines. But when you look at the effect that something like Parker had on wine or Michelin has on restaurant scenes, but I do think that we have a confident enough group of chefs here that they're going to say, forget it. We're going to do our thing. If you guys like it, that's good. And if you don't, I don't really see people changing the way they cook or their style of restaurants or suddenly investing $1 million in decor and cutlery and everything. I don't see it happening.
I believe you will see massive changes. With
you think people will adapt to Michelin?
You've seen it all through France. The Michelin Guide
in France for sure,
in certain areas, has been responsible for basically the annihilation of regional cooking in certain areas of France. Like if you look at the Jura today, it's impossible to find a bistro Jurassien food. There's lots of restaurants that look like you're walking onto the bridge of Star Trek, though. Right. That serve.
Yeah. I was just there last year and I couldn't find any local food, and I could find a lot of that Michelin style.
Look at Burgundy, right? You we know the classics of Burgundy. Me and Ari can name them off one by one. Now go to Burgundy and try to find any of those dishes. You will not find them
that are not a shitty touristy place. So you'll always find them in a shitty, but really authentically well done.
Because the Michelin Guide is not interested in the traditional cooking of regional France, right? They're consumed by luxury ingredients, then
innovative cuisine,
fashion and luxury, and even to a point design, right? Which leads to very peculiar modern restaurants.
Yeah, but there's another side too. As I spoke to a pastry chef one day who said, "Oh, I want to make something different. What should I make?" And I said, I really like a charlotte, right? It's that cake with all the lady fingers around the perimeter. And the guy said, I haven't been cooking for 30 years to make a charlotte. So there is also that thing in cooking that you don't necessarily want to repeat the classics. You don't want to maybe be the chef at L'Express doing this. Some people do want to innovate. And so I respect that kind of food too. If somebody really wants to make beautiful Michelin style cuisine, it all comes down, as long as it's delicious and there's some meaning to it, great. If it's really sharp, and we've all had that kind of really good Michelin food, the problem is that a lot of people are making kind of second-rate Michelin style food.
Which is also important, is I'm curious to see how much they dilute the guide for Quebec. All right. Because we're not a primary economy nor a secondary economy. It's basically a tertiary economy. right? We see like there's restaurants. I've eaten restaurants in New York City that have a Michelin star, and I'm like, this is a joke because it's not even close to the worst restaurant in Paris that I've been to that doesn't have a star. So a Michelin star in Paris means so much.
Yeah, and I've eaten in Michelin star restaurants in France, and I'm like, wow, this place is great. Really like sharp. And you're saying good for them, But a lot of restaurants in France, when they open, they already have Michelin in mind, right? It's not like when Ari opened his restaurant or when you opened Joe Beef that you were thinking with those Michelin criteria.
No, absolutely not. I would have liked to. Yeah, I wish I was younger and I would have liked the opportunity to get one, just because I worked in that system so long. You know, uh, it's hard to like look back. Like, okay, I'm 50 something now with lots of kids on a farm, and I wish I'd had a crack at a star at 30 something.
I wish they'd have come 10 years ago. Honestly, I wish they'd have come to Montreal 10 years ago when I felt the level was really high. It's not that it's like now we're looking post-pandemic, a lot of things have changed. But 10 years ago, or even 20, things were really sharp in Montreal. So, I don't know. I feel they took a long time to get here.
Yeah, that's all good. We'll see what happens. But it'll be an interesting podcast next week. And whatever the outcome is, I'm sure Ari will be well represented in that guide.
We'll dissect it.
I think we're going to turn a corner. It's getting late. Ari, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. This podcast and your answers to our questions were beyond my expectations. And honestly, I haven't gotten to speak to you long form in quite a while. I'll be putting some stuff in the garden for you.
That's where we hang
I've
out.
got some seeds here, and I'll be dropping that off.
You bring him you bring him produce, don't you?
Yeah, that's all I do. I grow stuff and I never charge them. I just bring stuff to Beba. And I love growing vegetables. I don't like selling vegetables.
What does he do well? What's his best stuff, Ari?
You know what? Last year, I'm trying to think what was really good. The melon was cool. The habanada peppers, which is something that's like like a habanero that has been hybridized or bred, has had the spice bred out of it. Sorry, not hybrid.
Not hot.
But they were absolutely the best ones. I had from 3 or 4 different producers. Gabe's were the best. They're the ripest, but when you're working at a scale like that, just like when you work on a scale like a Beba, you're just like, okay, like when is it better? Or maybe they got forgotten and they were overripe or whatever it was, but they were just so perfect. I pickled a bunch. We still have them. I eat them every once in a while.
I did good at tomatoes. I was a pretty good tomato grower.
Tomatoes are great. Yeah, tomatoes. You're totally right. Forgot about the
They're
tomatoes.
outdoor tomatoes too.
Tomatoes.
They're like field grown.
I'd be off on a Saturday and one of my cooks would be like, Dave came back with more tomatoes. What do you want me to do? I was just like, put them on everything. I don't care. They're incredible. Just go.
Yeah, put a slice of tomato on everything, or just give everybody a free slice. Like
that's the best kind of cooking.
Yeah, just a little salt and pepper tomato.
Tomato at the door with the bill. A tomato. Yeah. People used to put cookies and truffles.
One last
now
question.
You put a
I have one last thing.
there. It's nice.
Before we wrap this up, and I found this interesting to myself because, first of all, we're not an empanada culture in Montreal. And when you do find empanadas in Montreal, they're kind of like medium to not great. You come out swinging when you open the restaurant. You run the empanada for a couple of years, and arguably delicious. And not arguably delicious, completely delicious. Like the greatest empanada for me I've ever had. And I understood why you had to take them off the menu. Right, which was sad in a way. Was it sad for you? Because
no,
because you hated making them. I understand how it fills a customer up. Right,
it fills you up. I feel weird charging, restaurant. It just didn't fit with the way that the restaurant was evolving, and I'm sure it pissed a bunch of people off, but it just didn't fit. It's really filling. It's the first thing that you have and you're already half full. I don't know. That's not a good feeling to have at a restaurant when you're just starting off and you're already full and you're like dreading what's coming next.
It's like a ridiculous bread basket at a restaurant. You're going to love the bread basket. I went to that Carbone restaurant in Miami and they brought out arguably the most spectacular bread basket I've ever seen. It comes with olives. It comes with huge chunks of Parmesan. There's grissini. There's like 6 kinds of bread. So I had to try all the breads. And I was like, then I ate oysters and I was like, I want to leave. Right. And like, I still have appetizers coming and main course. I was just like, this is turning into being a horrific, bad experience. I'm embarrassed. I'm going to have to take all my food out doggy bag style and whatever. It's a smart idea because ultimately you're measuring the amount of food that the customer can put inside their stomach in one sitting. And you're trying to use that real estate intelligently, ultimately, right?
It comes from, you're running a business, you have to think about it from a business perspective too. It's just like, if they have this really filling first course, are they going to order this other thing or this other thing? I have food to sell, I'm not a big fan of like the very small plates for sharing kind of mentality. I prefer like you can have a few snacks so you can get like a single portion at first, and then some plates to share, and that feels natural. But like, there's no point in filling up your customer within the first course.
I have a last question because David said it's last question, but tell us about the name of the restaurant.
Okay, so
Beba.
Beba was my grandmother's nickname. Her real name was Vera, but everybody called her Beba because in Spanish, it's like little baby. It's like the little baby of the family, and she had a huge part in influencing in terms of food. There was like
she's a good cook.
Yeah, incredible, and like the stuff that you'd eat there, like. Like we were talking about the weird snacks that you eat as a line cook. I remember one of her favorite snacks would be like she'd be making a stock or whatever, and then she put out a plate of like chicken eggs and quail eggs, and you'd be snacking on that, waiting for your dinner. Or like, talking about the whole Italian influence, especially into Jewish food. You'd have your brisket. Braised brisket is a quintessential dish in North American Jewish cuisine, but there it was braised in tomato sauce, and it came with like a mountain of potato gnocchi. You know what I mean? So the key thing is we knew she was still with us when we named the restaurant, but we knew that she wasn't going to be able to travel.
Was she thrilled to hear about it?
Yeah, she was thrilled when we opened. It was great. And then one day I called her. I'll never forget this. I called her on her birthday. I was like, happy birthday. I'm so happy, blah, 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 all this stuff. She's like, hold on. Wait a second. I was on Facebook yesterday.
How old was she when she said this?
She was mid-80s. She was like, I was on Facebook yesterday.
On Facebook. I love it.
I saw a picture that somebody posted of your flan. It's all wrong. You need to do it like this. You need to do it like that.
I love it.
She was right. 100%. You know what
of course.
I didn't strain my mix before going into the molds, which, as you would probably know, pops all the air bubbles, so you don't end up with air bubbles around. So
I love your grandmother. A
very, very strong-willed woman with a lot of character, and never afraid to tell you how things are. And we miss her every day. She meant a lot to us, so she's still there.
Beautiful, sir. Ari, thank you so much. We all thank you, Dan Delmar from
Thank you, Ari.
NKR, Lesley, and I. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us. I love you. You know that.
Love you too,
all the best. And let's do this again in a few months.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about winter food in the fall, maybe.
Let's do that. Amazing.
We just want to remind anybody, if there are any questions, we take them on saltlickpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find us, when you find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts or whatever, please give us a very kind and generous Michelin-style review so that people can find this podcast, listen to all these great topics together with us. And Ari, I loved hearing everything.
I think you put up an Instagram account, Lesley. There's at Salt Lake Podcast. You can follow that at Salt Lake Podcast. And
we're going to put up pictures of Ari as a baby. We will put up pictures of David as a baby in his diaper. We will put up a lot of embarrassing pictures of them, not me. And yeah, absolutely. And we'll be announcing future guests too. But this was really one for the ages. Thanks, Ari.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
ThinkBait. TNKR Media. Good talk.